So this session, Moodle Gradebook Clinic, is an opportunity to go over some of the more commonly asked questions that we get here at TLT. And currently, I'm going to record a couple of areas which I think are useful to point out, not only as a refresher, but also as a um, area or feature or aspect of the gradebook you may not have realized was available. The things that I wanted to cover were number one, just general reminders or refreshers on managing the gradebook between assignments and things like forums and quizzes that when you create them, they generate their own grade item. And managing manually graded items, how those things kind of can be handled in the grade book. That would include adding feedback, different views of the grade book when you're going to administer grades, and also looking at things like extra credit. Can I establish extra credit items in the grade book? Can I use bonus points? Um, Specifically in a quiz, how does that work? Because that does entail you needing to do some things in the grade book in order for it to calculate properly. How can I maybe do some bulk insert of grades if I want to push out the same grade to all students? Is there an easy way to do that? Um, and also just looking at some other things like how do I hide grade items? The aggregation methods that are available at this point in the semester. Most folks have probably figured out how they're going to be grading students, but this way you have a handle on the different options that you have. So let's get started. So first and foremost, managing grades kind of starts with what types of assignments or activities you might be using within the gradebook. For example, if you create an assignment or a forum, such as you see in here, as you're creating these, they generate their own grade item. And the process of you actually creating an assignment, one of the options you have in the settings area is to actually establish the grading information. This is actually currently in use, so that's why you're seeing this. But typically, when you're building that assignment at the first at step one, you would be you have the opportunity to modify the maximum grade points or opt on whether or not you're going to use a rubric and that kind of thing. So that's built into the process of creating those activities. So once you do that, naturally it generates a grade item. And so if I jump over to my grade book, I can see any of these hyperlinked items are actually those activities that I've created previously where that grade item was generated. And I can easily click over and link over to that assignment um, if I wanted to. The other option is you can create manual grade items. And these are the grade items that are not linked. They're just an input box where you can enter a grade for a student. This might be for the purposes of an oral presentation in the course, or maybe you're not using Moodle activities or forums or those items in Moodle that generate a grade item, but you do still want to build items in your grade book. You can use the manual grade items. So there's those two different ways to go about creating grade items. When I go into my gradebook setup, so from my grades menu area, when I jump into the gradebook, I'm immediately brought to the grader report. So if I jump on down from this drop down and go to gradebook setup, here's where I see all of my grade items, and here's where I can manage my grade items. By default, the gradebook is set to be weighted or naturally weighted. And what that means is and either adding manual grade items or creating those assignments and forums and quizzes that generate a grade item. Um, they are weighted based on the number of points or maximum points that you're grading the student out of. So, for example, in this case, my max grades for each of these items is listed here. The default is 100, but in some cases, when I went to go build my quiz, when I went to go add my assignments here, I actually changed the out of grade points value. And because of that, it will impact the weight it has overall towards the final grade. And so that's how naturally weighted works. The weight is based on the number of maximum points for that item. So it's relative to how many points you might assign a certain grade item. So in this assignments category, all of the items and their points add up to 225. So for this particular chapter question homework assignment, I issued it to be a maximum number of points achievable at 25. So that's making its overall weight to the assignment category 11.11%. So that would be how that natural weighted gradebook works. And I can change the aggregation on a gradebook. You probably want to determine this up front. So as you're building in the grade items, you don't have to kind of retroactively readjust things. But for example, if I wanted to do um, a weighted mean of grades aggregation in my gradebook, what I would do is from the gradebook setup, from this very topmost section, I could go to edit grade category. And this is the category that encompasses all the grade items in the gradebook. I can change this aggregation if I wanted to. I could do weighted mean of grades, simple weighted mean of grades, or mean of grades with extra credit. So like I said, the default is natural. But for instance, if I wanted to say do weighted mean of grades, and I'll show you some examples of that. I'm not going to change it here because I don't want to impact what I have set up currently. But my weighted mean of grades gives me the opportunity to essentially just grade students their overall average. So everything equals to 100%. And so each of those grade items, as I am grading them, their direct points value or their direct grade value, um, every grade value is weighted evenly. And so it's just a basic average across all of their grade items. Um, so that would be the weighted mean of grades, but I am able to determine if maybe one assignment over the other has any particularly extra weight towards the final grade by this input box over here. The simple weighted mean is it's just a strict average of all of the grades put together. So those are the two other aggregation options that you have in the gradebook. But the default is actually to be naturally weighted. So again, it's based off of how many points each grade item has, and in relation to those points, that's the weight it will have ultimately for the category it's in, or ultimately towards the final grade. So I'm going to jump over to the grader report. And the grader report is the default view of the actual grade book. And it's basically unlike the previous version of Moodle. One of the most notable changes, and I have some theories on why they did that. They didn't really specifically explain why. One of the most notable issues now is if you are looking to input or edit grades directly within the gradebook in the grader report, you have to go into edit mode. Previously, you just would click into a cell and boom, you could enter the grade. But now you have to be in edit mode, similar to how you have to be in edit mode when you're actually on the main course page to either edit content you've uploaded or to add things. So once you go into edit mode, you obviously see all the input boxes appear. And as previously mentioned, when you're creating those activities and those assignments in Moodle, like for example, I have an assignment that I created here. I actually have a quiz with bonus set up here. Those automatically create, or as you're creating those items, they create the grade item. So the assumption is that you're going to probably grade those students within those activities. So if that's the case, those grade items will automatically populate in here. But you have number one within the grader report, the option to override the grade from the grader report, or two, if you have manually added graded items, um, this is where you would input them. So if I jump back over to my gradebook setup, if I did need to create manual grade items up here in the drop down that says add, I could just add a grade item. And this would be, for example, I'm not really using any of these activities in or tools in Moodle that would require setting up a grade, but I just want a place in the gradebook to enter in a grade and keep track of students' progress. So you could add these manual grade items. And so you would definitely would need to enter those grades in the grader report directly in this area. When you're in the grader report, you can add feedback, not only just the actual numerical grade, but the way in which you could add feedback to those manual grade items is, so for instance, for this student, I could click down on this drop down and say edit grade. Now notice it says view feedback. I've already kind of left her some feedback, but if I were to click on here, I could edit grade. And then it would give me just her specific grade item that I can then edit, and I can type in additional feedback with this rich text editor. If I've left feedback in a grade item itself, like an assignment, for example, if I just quickly jump over to this assignment A file submission, which is all, is here. This is where it's showing up in my gradebook. But if I just jumped in there and say I graded it from within the assignment, because that's where she's uploaded the document, and there's nothing here. She hasn't necessarily uploaded anything here. This is just an example. That's why it's blank. But here, I might tend to enter the grade here. I might tend to enter the feedback here. But say if I'm jump over into the grader report, I still have access to editing the grade here and entering feedback as well. So I can still add feedback even if I've done some feedback over in the grade item. I can, over in the assignment, I can also still add feedback over here as well. Another way in which you can use the gradebook to enter grades is the single view option. So if I clicked over to single view, you have two ways in which you can use this. Number one is you can view it by user, and then you would just have to type in their name, and it would pull up the student, and it would give you a view of all of their grade items. So you could, if need be, you could grade each item for the student in this way. Notice how these are all grayed out. It's because in this case, it's assuming that you're grading them in the actual activity itself. That's why these are grayed out. If, say, I wanted to override that, I would essentially just click on this override button, and it would open it up to me to let me just do what I want to do in terms of grading and feedback right within the gradebook here. Notice how the manual grade item doesn't have that because it's the only place in Moodle where I can enter the grade. Another option is you can use grade items by the grade item. So if I click over to this, from this drop down here, I can kind of jump between different grade items to grade. So for instance, my chapter question, I can go into that and I can go ahead and just issue the grade for each student and issue feedback for each student here. One of the options in this case for the single view when you're grading by grade item is you get this additional actions option. And here you have a couple of options. One is I can go ahead and override all of the grades. This is more or less specific to, this would more or less relate more so to those activities that you've built within Moodle and you're grading within the activity. So you're not really overriding anything here. You're essentially, this is the only place where you can enter the grade. But you can exclude all, exclude none, and bulk insert grades. So if you just wanted to push out a general grade for everyone, you could do a bulk insert. And then you could basically just say all grades and then enter whatever that grade is going to be and give it to each of the students or empty grades. See, for example, Alina has a 20. I don't want to override that, but if I wanted to give everybody else, an 18 or something like that, I can go ahead and enter that in. And it would update their grade for that. And it's just refreshing. So that's like one option that not many folks are aware of. They have that ability to push out like a general grade to everybody. Notice it's essentially just the numerical grade. It doesn't really let you do that for the feedback. At least I didn't notice that as one of the options. Yeah, so it would just be the numerical grade there. So I'm going to jump
I
back.
have,
Oh, yep, go ahead.
sorry, quick question. I'm wondering how you got here because I'm in the grade book, because this would be
Mhm.
very helpful because I've never
Yeah,
used this before, but I think this would
sure.
help a lot. So you're in grades. If I do single view, it just goes to the users, but I'm wondering if I'm in the wrong spot. So I'm just wondering how you got there from like the original, like chapter questions is the name of the assignment.
Sure. I'll backtrack a minute. So I'm going to start at the grader report,
Right.
and then I went to single view, and it might bookmark where I was when I jumped in here. But when I first come in
Mm.
here, I think the default is it's set to view by user,
Mm.
and it's usually empty. Let me see if I can, is it go back to where it was clear.
Oh, grade items on the right? No. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
so
Oh.
so when you first come in here, it's going to be completely blank, and I think it's
Mm.
defaulted to user, so you have to like type in a student name and then you will be able to like choose them and it will pull them up. But if you jump over to grade items, there's this
Hmm.
drop down, and this is where you would select the grade.
Yes.
Are you seeing that?
Yes, this
Okay.
makes much more sense now.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's weird how it's click over here for the grade items, but then jump back over here to choose which one you want. So it's kind of in a
Right.
visually not close place to notice. So yeah,
Hmm.
you would just click on grade items and then you have this little drop down where you can jump between the different grade items.
Okay. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Okay.
Beautiful.
So I was going to jump into the gradebook setup. There's a couple of things that I wanted to point out here. Number one, this was something that I didn't even know of, but it was super helpful to figure out because sometimes an instructor might have an assignment, but they're only using it as a Dropbox. They don't want it to be a grade item for whatever reason. And so you can do that when you're creating the item itself. Like, for instance, if I go into this, assignment that I created and I go to settings, I could actually say no grade. And initially, it won't let me do it now because I have stuff on in here. But typically when you're creating a grade or an activity, one of the options is the default is definitely for it to be a value or a numerical grade, but you can say no grade and save it. And so it knows that this item is not going to be counted towards the grade as an actual item in the grade book. But even so, it still shows up in the grade book. And it's kind of confusing. Well, okay, this is just a Dropbox. Why is it still showing up in the grade book? But you can hide extraneous items in the grade book if you want, but without making the actual assignment itself invisible to the student. They just won't see it as a grade book item. So for example, let's go ahead. I'm going to just hide this here, this grade item. And so now this is hidden here. If I go out to the main course page, and here's where it is. If I go to my student view, let's see, switch to role. I'm still seeing it as a Dropbox item. If I go to my grades area, I'm pretty sure it will not show up here. So it kind of separates it out as it's not a grade item, it's just a grade book, it's just a Dropbox. So that's how you can kind of hide grade items within the grade book specifically, but not hide the entirety of the assignment from view. And I think sometimes I think there's been a scenario where maybe an instructor has decided to, um, just ignore that grade item, or they, for whatever reason, they just don't want it to be viewable. I think sometimes if someone's inherited a grade book and they don't really have time to kind of fully resort things and figure it out, they can go ahead and hide things. So that was a helpful thing to note in terms of how you can just hide grade items from the student view without it hiding the actual assignment Dropbox that it's affiliated with. It would be nice if, say, you're setting up an activity and you say no grade and save it, that it knows not to even bother having it show up in the grade book at the start of things. But I guess in this way, you have the option of changing that at some point and it then still being available in the grade book. The other thing you can create are extra credit items. So when you initially go to create an item, so if you have an existing activity that you've already set up and you say, okay, I'm going to make this specific item an extra credit item, you would go to edit the item in the gradebook setup. And down below is here. You'll just select grade extra credit. And what that'll do is it recognizes it as an extra credit item. So notice how the overall points reduces itself because it's only going to count it if they get a grade. It's not going to count it if you don't give them a grade for it. It's basically gonna be ignored unless you give them a grade for it. And so that's how you essentially would make something an extra credit item. If you're making a separate extra credit item and it's not one of these, it's not tied to an actual existing activity, and you're like, no, no, just on top of what they already have, I want to create an extra credit item. You would go ahead and you would just add a grade item, like a manual grade item. But kind of the weird thing is, um, it doesn't let you it doesn't let you click this right away. So you would go ahead and you can save the changes. You have to create the grade item first, and then once you've saved it, um, you could go back and then establish it as extra credit. And I'm not sure why it does that, but it's just a handy thing to note is if you're just creating a manual extra credit item, you have to create it first and then you go in and you establish it as extra credit. Um, I'm going to delete this one here. Oops. And there's also something called a way in which you can do bonus points, which, I mean, there's a couple of different things you can do. Um, So within the context of an actual grade item, a bonus grade item works the same way, is the same as it would be an extra credit item. But just recently, an instructor was like, well, how can I make bonus questions in a quiz? Because it's not like when you're creating a quiz and you want to add a bonus question, there's no place where you can say, hey, make this a bonus question so that if they get it right, they get the bonus points. If they get it wrong, it's not going to penalize them. If they get a perfect 100, they still get an extra bump towards of points towards their ultimate grade. Um, but within the context of something like a quiz, it always caps it at 100. They can only always just get 100%. And if they did get the bonus question wrong, it's going to mark it as it's not going to give them the points, but it could potentially penalize them if they it's going to reduce, it's not going to give them any of the points and ultimately impact their grade. So there's something within each grade item called multipliers and offset. And so I'm just going to show you, for example, in the case of this quiz, if I go to edit this quiz item and I click on show more because it will fully expand, there's something called a multiplicator, which you can use to make a grade item act as to, to act as if it has a bonus functionality to it. This offset is primarily if you want to add an add-on points across all the students. If you wanted to like push out an extra 3 points, you can go ahead and set the offset to 3 and it will apply that to everybody's grade. So I think I know one instructor who's used it. Um, I don't know if it was they were grading on a curve or they wanted to just sort of more easily just push out an extra so many points on top of what the students already had as the grade. But the multiplicator is what can be used to, within the context of a quiz, to calculate a bonus type of situation. So, for example, if I just backtrack so you can see how it looks from the user point of view. So here's my bonus with quiz with bonus. So here are the 3 scenarios. So here's a scenario where the student got a perfect 100 plus the 2 bonus points. Here's a situation where the student got all of the questions right, but they got the bonus wrong. So they still got 100%. Or maybe they opted not to answer the bonus question. And here's a situation where not so great, even so, this was a very simple quiz, was they got one of the main questions wrong, but they did get the bonus. So they would have done a lot worse had they not gotten the bonus. The bonus was just 2 points, so it wasn't a lot to really bump up their grade here, but they still got a little bit of extra because they got the bonus right. And so what I would do, there are 2 things I would do in order to do this. Number one is if I go into my quiz and I go to my questions area, and here I have, in this case, again, a very simple quiz example. I've got my main questions, each worth 10, and then I have my bonus question, which is 2. And what I want to do is within here, I want to tell the quiz the maximum grade is 20, which is the regular questions add up to 20. So I would actually want to make sure that this is set to 20 and save that. Now Moodle is adding up everything, the question points and the bonus. So this is just what Moodle is going to be adding up. Then what I need to do is I need to determine the multiplicator, which would be the total number of points possible with the bonus, 22, and divide that by the maximum grade, which is 20, and I get the multiplicator or multiplier, which would be 1.1. And that's where in the grade book, I would go ahead and I'm going to just backtrack again. So in my grade book, And it would be nice if you could just click bonus, but it's almost like it's making you do the extra steps for them. So then for this grade item here, that's where when I go to edit the grade, I can put that multiplier in of 1.1 and it will know that um, it knows how to grade after it after all those automatic, all the questions are automatically graded based on how the quiz is set up. It knows how to factor in that bonus based on how the student performed. I know another instructor who's used this to make certain quizzes where the student has some choice, where they only have to answer 4 out of the 5 questions, but then they get to choose which ones they want to answer. And so then it will only always grade them out of a certain number of points. So that's kind of how that works in terms of making a quiz with a bonus question. Um, I hope to see someday where maybe they do set up quizzes where you can say make this click, make this a bonus question and it does all that math behind the scenes for you and you're not having to do it separately. Because what occurs is in the quiz itself, the students are going to see the actual calculated grade that the quiz is given them. So in the quiz, they'll see one grade based on how the quiz is automatically grading it. But the grade book is what's actually doing the calculation related to the bonus. So they might see, like they'll see their grade in the grade book or in the quiz, but then it's in the grade book where they'll see where the bonus has taken effect. Now, some folks don't even bother with that. They might just say, I'm gonna, you know, override whatever calculated grade the quiz gave them to just manually add the bonus myself, which is fine. It's just this is one way you can do it where there's a little bit of work set up in the beginning, but then the grade book will compensate for the bonus within the grade book. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. So let me jump back over to the um, grade book. Just keep backtracking a little bit. Um, in the grade book setup, just some other basic housekeeping as far as how you can move or reorder items. Um, One of the interface changes with 4.5 is you can select multiple items to move by just selecting them, the checkbox, then clicking move on the footer, and then just picking and choosing where you want them to go. If you want to move them outside of a category, you can just click over to that topmost category, which is in fact the overall gradebook. Um, and then it will just move them to the tippy top of the gradebook and take it outside of the category. Or if you just want to move individual items, you would just click this up down arrow. And I think the interface has gotten a little bit easier where it's easier to discern, okay, where am I in the grade book and where do I want to move this? It will indicate for you which one you are in fact looking to move by having this little move in parentheses. And then you can just move it to whatever positioning represented by these dotted lines, and it will move it to that spot. Now, if you're moving things after you've already set up your grade book and established weights, you definitely want to, keep watch of that because it's going to, if you're in the natural weighted grade book and you're letting it kind of calibrate or adjust things for you, it will probably change that around depending on if you're moving one item from one category into another category, the overall points for the category is going to change, and therefore some of the weighting is going to be readjusted too. So you want to always keep watch of that. Um, Let me just see here. And the other thing is even if you're in the natural weighted um, gradebook, you always have the ability to really override or adjust any of these things. So you just have to click on the checkbox next to them and, put in whatever weights you want to establish. Now, if I put in 45 here, based in relation to the other items, it's going to give me a warning that things are, are exceeding or under. Um, and notice how if I uncheck these, it actually, oh, I think I took everything out of the assignment category. So, but if I if I uncheck these, it's going to like basically do the math for me. So for instance, if for my chapter questions, I'm going to give it 10%, it's going to know to readjust everything else to compensate it. Um, and I think what I'll do is I'm going to remove all of these back into this assignment category because there's nothing in there. So I'll just move it back. And again, it's establishing the weight based on the number of points. But again, I can override that if I wanted to, just by clicking on the checkbox next to it and retyping in the weight. When I'm over in the grader report, I'm just going to go ahead and leave this here. If I ever want to see what students are seeing, over by the student's name, again, this little kebab icon is telling me there's more to this, and there's a little menu I can click on and see what options I have. I can go to the user report, and this essentially is going to show me what the students see. Um, so if you ever want to preview how a student is seeing something, this is how you can do that. Um, and I'm going to go to Alina. I think I actually have a full set of grades in there for her. So it just kind of gives you a sense of how it would look um, overall. And as their grades are being entered, um, what this calculated weight column is, it's determining how much of this item is, or how much weight does this item have towards the final grade based on um, what's, I think, already in there. Um, so that tends to fluctuate, I think. So, yeah, empty. Let me see. Participation. Wait, 80%. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So it's indicating how much of the weight that item has towards the grade. So they're seeing the calculated weight and the actual grade that they got for the item. I'm trying to see if there's anything else on my list that I wanted to address. But if there's any questions that you might have, Anna, let me know.
I'm finally putting it all together. It's making
Yeah,
sense to me.
little by little. I mean, it's there's as you can see, there's quite a few menus in here. Scales is another altogether um, involved, area where there are what are called standard scales and user scales. You can create your own scales. So, for example, if I were to click on these, I can set up a grade type. Like if I'm creating an assignment, I can say I want this to be a scale. And so instead of entering a number, I would just select whatever their feedback is based on a drop-down scale. And the way that it works is that each value, which is usually like a word like satisfactory, non-satisfactory, is has a numerical, a number, an integer affiliated with it. So for example, if I did a yes, no scale, it's basically 2 points. No, one for no, yes, yes is two. So it kind of, it's assigning 1 point to each of those items on the actual scale. And so it's kind of interesting how it works. One of the things we ended up doing was because there was this letter grade scale, this is only out of 12 points because it's got 12 items on the scale. But when you use that, it doesn't really map to the actual letter grade scale that is used um, to determine what makes an A minus or a C minus, because there's many, many, values in between. So we created this grade scale with value placeholders. So at any point along this, not everybody is gonna, they're just looking to either give an F, a D plus, a C minus. So this is kind of the way we addressed how, and there's a couple of universities that do it this way, is that they create a scale where at any point, that any F is going to be fully representative of an F value. Any D is fully representative of a D score. Um, so for example, oh yeah, I wanted to go. So what I'm meaning by that is so for these, so they basically generally represent all of the in-betweens, you know. So everything between 100 and a 93 is an A. So then there's a one value integer on that scale to represent all the numbers in between. So it's kind of a very basic scale option, but that's kind of one of the options there that some folks use. Um, the only other thing that I'll point out before we wrap up is when you're in the grader report, you have a few viewing options. Like you can actually filter things by grades only, by totals only. Um, you can also collapse these different columns. So, if you're just looking to focus on specific grade items as you go, you can collapse the individual items and just hide them. If visibility wise, you're just wanting to focus on certain things, you can you can do those types of things in the grade book, and then you can just expand them again if you want. And that's at every level. At the overall grade book level, you can show grades only, totals only, or both. At the category level, you can do grades only, totals only, or both. And then at the item level, you can collapse the individual columns if you want. Um, so do you have any other things before we wrap up?
That's all I can think of for
Okay.
now.
All right.
Um, Thanks for always helping me.
Yes. Well, it's a pleasure. And let us know if you run into any other questions. Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it, and I hope you found this useful.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye bye.